All right. Good evening. I'm chairperson of the Committee of Adjustment. My name is Phil Pocock. The order of today's meeting will be under my direction. I'm going to introduce Ian Rawlings at the back as our junior planner. Then we got Dan Sove, a committee member, Doreen Lester, another committee member. To my far right, Matthew Child, committee member, Bill Baker, committee member and co-chair. And then to my immediate right is Marcia Bhakta. And yeah, I got it right this time. So all items in the agenda must be acknowledged by me prior to discussion, presentation, or decision. When I acknowledge you to speak, you can address me as chair. Please be advised all proceedings and decisions of this committee are undertaken without bias or conflict of interest. Any conflict of interest for members of the committee will be declared at the beginning of the meeting or prior to the application being heard. All members of the audience wishing to speak will be able to do so when acknowledged by myself in accordance with the published agenda. Each person is allowed 5 minutes. When invited to speak, please approach the podium at the back of the room, turn the microphone on by pressing the button, wait a second for the microphone to turn on, and we'll have a blue light. We ask all in attendance to be respectful, only speak to the application at hand. Any topics that deviate from the application will not be considered or tolerated. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed to the town's YouTube page. And Ian, would you like to do the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Chair. There we go. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wendat peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Thank you.
Any declaration of conflict of interest? Not seeing any. Adoption of published agenda. Committee of Adjustments meeting for November 19th, 2024. Okay. A second. Doreen, all in favor? Good. Minutes from October 16th, 2024. Moved by Doreen, seconded by Matthew. All in favor? All right. And we'll move to the first application, A16-24, 133 Laird Avenue. And Ian, you've got the floor.
Sure. Our first application tonight is A1624 for the property 133 Laird Avenue. The property is located on the north side of Laird, west of Victor Street, and is currently vacant. The subject property is not located within the Essex Region Conservation Authority's limit of regulated area. It does not contain any natural heritage features or items identified on the Ontario Heritage Act and is not located in a parking exemption area. Subject property is designated residential under the Town of Essex official plan and is zoned Residential District 3.1 under the Town of Essex zoning bylaw. The applicant is proposing to construct a 3-story apartment building with a total of 9 dwelling units. The apartment building will have a total building height of 9.6 meters and a gross floor area of 790 square meters. The apartment building will be located 3.42 meters from the southern interior lot line and 3.05 meters from the northern interior lot line. The apartment building will have 6 balconies encroaching up to a maximum of 1.2 meters into the required northern interior side yard. Next slide, please. Due to the location of the proposed development, relief from subsection 16.1B8 of the zoning bylaw is required, as it requires a side yard width minimum of 6 meters, where a habitable room window of any dwelling unit faces a side lot line. The applicant is currently proposing a side yard setback of 3.42 meters from the southern interior lot line and 3.05 meters from the northern interior lot line. And for clarification, a habitable room window means a window of any one or more of the following rooms within a dwelling or dwelling unit, such as a dining room, living room, family room, or bedroom. The R3.1 zone does contain other side yard setbacks, but these are based on the number of traffic lanes between lot lines and the building, and the setbacks for the building if it had no habitable windows. These setbacks are not listed on screen today. Next slide, please. Furthermore, Section 9.5 of the zoning bylaw details encroachment rights for building features. Section 9.5C specifically permits balconies to encroach into a required side yard to a maximum depth equal to 25% of the required side yard width. Since the encroachment is permitted based on a percentage factor, the required side yard width heavily dictates the size of a balcony and its ability to encroach into a side yard. The applicant is proposing to construct 6 balconies to encroach up to a maximum of 1.2 meters into the northern side yard, which is approximately 40% of the side yard setback, therefore requiring relief from Section 9.5C. Hello. Right. Next slide, please. Here we have a site plan detailing the layout of the proposed development. Compliance with the zoning bylaw for all other regulations have been verified. This includes loading spaces, refuse areas, buffering between parking and neighboring residential, and required number of parking spaces. The site plan also details where the neighboring residential dwelling is to the south of the property. Next slide, please. So I've also provided a zoomed in version which highlights the variances required. Areas highlighted in red detail the requested side yard setback, and areas highlighted in green are requesting relief for the encroachment of the balconies. Next slide, please. Here we have the proposed floor plan with furniture. So that you can see what is being proposed inside and demonstrating what a habitable room is. Next slide, please. And here we have the elevation drawings detailing the proposed development and the balconies. So you can see the balconies encroaching on the top right there. That would be the northern face of the building. Next slide, please. And here we just have some images of the property. This is of the subject property and the neighboring property to the north, being a 6-story apartment building and parking lot. Next slide, please. Here, you can see the side lot line to the south and the neighboring low-density residential. Next slide, please. Here's a direct line of the northern interior lot line. Next slide, please. One more of the southern interior lot line. And then one more of the southern interior lot line, but from the other end of the property. Alrighty. And then from here, the 4 tests provided by the Planning Act and the 2 tests provided by the official plan were prescribed, and the application satisfies the criteria. The intent of the official plan is maintained as the County OP supports flexibility in development and the reduction of non-hazardous setbacks, while the Essex OP encourages infill development and various housing types. The intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained as a buffer between land uses is provided, and circulation through the site is still achievable. All land uses on all sides are considered residential, and the applicant will be installing a privacy fence along the southern lot line as well, and frosted glass along the windows on the southern that face the southern properties to mitigate any potential impacts to privacy for those existing developments. The construction of the fence has been made a condition of recommended approval. However, the requirement for the frosted glass is not, as it's not an item that the town is capable of enforcing at this time. Now, this application has been deemed minor as there are no anticipated impacts from the encroachments, such as drainage and so on. Additionally, the neighboring low-density residential is able to construct up to 10 meters in height with a side yard setback of 1.2 meters. So this development is pretty similar in that if those sites were maximized as well. This application has been deemed appropriate as it's an efficient use of land and represents compact, flexible development. The character area is maintained as this is a transitional space from high to low density residential, and this building is pretty far set back, further from its front lot line, and maintains a low profile. And then lastly, the variance is needed to facilitate the development of a structure with habitable room windows on all sides for a lot that does not exceed the minimum lot width standards for the R3.1 zone, being 60 meters. 60 meters. Right. Next slide, please. Now, the application was circulated to all internal and external agencies. No comments or objections were received at this time. Next slide, please. Now, one comment was received from Mike Hansen at 130 Laird, which expressed concerns regarding drainage capabilities, snow and ice removal, and overflow parking. And some phone correspondence was received regarding the fence to the rear of the property and potential impacts to the privacy for existing neighboring residential developments to the south. Next slide, please. All right. The planning department is recommending approval with the condition that the continuous privacy fence be constructed along the southern lot line prior to the issuance of a building permit. Next slide, please. And here is to remind the committee of the decisions they can make tonight. You can either approve the application with or without conditions. You can defer the application pending information or deny the application. However, a deferral or denial, we ask that you specify the reasonings for it. Thank you.
Jackie, do you have anything to add to this?
Ian, that was fabulous. I concur with everything that you said. I do want to just make a couple of points. Marcia, would you be able to put up the site plan? I just wanted to indicate, that's perfect, thank you. I just wanted to indicate a couple of things. If you notice, the balconies are on the side, adjacent to the parking lot for the apartment building that's next door to it to the north. There is huge distance separation. I think it was 300 plus meters between this building and the actual front face of the building to the north, the apartment building to the north. The building to the south, as you can see, the residence to the south is absolutely distance separated, and the balconies are not on this face of the building. This is the front door of the building. Balconies are only on the rear, on the north facing. Okay. The clients had regard for the neighbors, and you can see on the west side of the building, I don't believe there are any windows that are proposed, but there is a 6-story or a 6-foot fence, wood fence along the back property line. I believe that there's some spots where there isn't fence there presently, and that's what will be fixed. Yes, if you look, there's an elevation, Marcia. You can see, there we go. There are no windows facing the neighbors to the west, so they are not going to have any infringement. The setbacks that we're requesting relief from tonight are to the north and to the south, and we feel that being distance separated, it's very appropriate, and the request is minor. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Go ahead there, Bill.
Jackie, you just mentioned that there's no windows facing the neighbor on the west side. The elevation appears to have windows.
Don't believe it does. If it does, they're small.
Can we?
Take a look. Sorry, Marcia.
Okay, so west, okay. Yeah, can you throw up the site plan? So,
Sure. Go back to the floor plan.
okay, so I guess when you're referring to that as west. Okay, my Yep, yeah, and so my apologies. So to the south is what I'm really referring to. But is there windows? So windows facing that neighbor
Yes.
to the south.
If you could bring up the site plan. And there'll be a 6-foot high board fence along that property line.
Okay.
As you can see. Neighbor.
Yep. 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 Eh, Oh, there. Thank you. Thank you. So the setback's far back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that's good. Pictures worth 1,000 words.
From the committee? No, anything? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Marlon. I was gonna go to the public. I just want, any questions from the public? If you wouldn't mind going to the back and stating your name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Gord Wright. I live at 138 Laird, so pretty close. My question is partially a statement plus a question. The two existing buildings as apartments don't have enough parking spaces. And therefore, the people are parking mostly either on Laird or parking on Victor. And especially on Victor, if a car is making a turn from Laird onto Victor, and there happens to be a car coming up the opposite way, there's not enough space if there's cars parked there. And I'm wanting to know how many parking spots are proposed for the new apartment and how many spots for visitors.
Through you, Chair. There's a couple points I want to touch on for this one. The two apartment buildings that are existing around the area were constructed at a time when our parking section, the section in our zoning bylaw for parking hadn't been updated. Seeing the issues that this had created, we underwent a study and back in April implemented new parking regulations. So this property will have to provide more parking than if it was constructed, say, a year or 2 years ago. So with it, we anticipate that this wouldn't increase any issues with the parking in the area. And then as for the intersection itself down the street, that I would say is kind of outside the scope of this application. However, I would recommend submitting a ticket to report a problem, and that brings that up. Yeah.
I drive that every day.
Yep.
And it's a problem.
Mhm.
So,
Yep. And with it, that allows our infrastructure and our development teams to look into it further with a formal submission.
there needs to be some. There's gonna be an accident there, and it could very well be a big one if there happens to be snow wrecks. And I would hate to think it's because committee or committee didn't solve the problem. That's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wanting to speak on this application? Oh, go ahead there. You have to go to.
Hello, I'm Rita Rushlow and I live at 137 Laird. I'm the house that's going to be right at the 6-foot fence. To start, I'm concerned about the value of my property going down. I'm concerned about the privacy. When the 6-story apartment building went up, I lost a lot of privacy, but I got used to it. But this one's going to be different. It's going to be right at my backyard. 6-foot fence or not, and at the front of the apartment building, the parking lot in the front, it's going to be right, again, at my yard, the front yard. And as it is now, I hear a lot of, car doors slamming and, and when the sanitation workers come to pick up the garbage, it's unbelievable, the noise. That's, I don't know how the people in the apartment building can stand it myself. But anyway, and I was concerned about the parking and not being enough and not taking in, supplying more parking for visitors. And a smaller building wouldn't have been so obtrusive. And it will take over my backyard. The noise, the noise factor was one, and so pretty well that's oh, and not to mention what's going to go on when they're constructing that apartment building and the parking lot. But that's all I have to say.
Go ahead there, Doreen.
Hey, Mr. Chair, what is the height restriction in this area? In feet, please.
Right there, Ian.
Through you, Chair. Just one moment and I'll pull that up for you. So the maximum building height in this area is 39 feet or 12 meters.
Okay, so if it wasn't, so it meets the required height and potentially could go a bit higher than it currently is. If the building was narrower, would a developer be able to build an apartment complex there narrower so it meets the setback that's required, closer right up against this lady's home and not pushed back farther at the end of the lot?
With it, through you, Chair, it depends on which side yard setback is applied. With it, there's currently 4 side yard setbacks regulations, and 2 of which are dependent on whether or not there's traffic by between the property lot line and the building. So I'm not going to speak to those ones because that's not for this development. But one of those setbacks is the 20 feet. So the 20 feet from a habitable room window. And then with it, regardless of the size of the development, they have to meet that 20-foot setback. So if it's only 1 story, they still have to be 20 feet from that lot line. Or if they're 4 stories, they have to be 20 feet. But then the other setback regulation is if there's no habitable room windows, then they're able to encroach up to 30% equal to the building's height. So if the building is 10 meters in height, they'd be able to be 3 meters from the lot line. So with it, it really depends on the height of the building and what's inside the building, what allows them to encroach. I hope that provides some clarity.
Thank you. So in theory, if and again, it's just in theory, but if this development they're seeking 3 meters relief. If it was 3 meters narrower, then in theory, they could build the building as it currently is up against the house, not in the front. like not in the back like it currently is. Is that correct? Or they wouldn't even need to come here. Is that correct?
Sorry, through you, Chair. I'm just a little confused on it, and I don't want to say yes or no to it without fully understanding it. Can I have you repeat it one more time?
Or through you, Mr. Chair. So my question is just regarding the concern for if this development doesn't happen and another development comes in, is a developer able to create a building of that height, right? But be able to, so this particular development, if it was 3 meters narrower, and would it be able to, and met the required setback because it was constructed in the same manner? Could it, in theory, be anywhere along that line of the property?
Yes, that is correct. They could be at any point along that line, as long as they meet, of course, other setbacks being their front and rear yard, of course.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go ahead there, Matthew.
Chair, and I thank you, Doreen, for that question. I had a similar question. My understanding is that if there was no relief from the 20-foot setbacks for either the north or the south yard, that a structure like this would be permitted pretty much anywhere in the envelope. And I did appreciate how, and I realize it's a practical consideration in terms of driveway width not being available, et cetera, but it did give me some comfort that the building was, facing the backyard of the adjacent property and not right at the house. So, so a couple of questions. One is that, and I think actually you just answered it. With the current zoning of R3, if there were 20-foot setbacks from the side yards, this development would be permitted. So the height and the general dimensions would be roughly comparable. There would, there would be a slightly greater side yard setback, but it would still be a fairly imposing structure when viewed from the neighboring property. But I had two questions though. One was around drainage, which we did receive some input from a neighbor in writing prior to this meeting. And I'm just wondering if you can describe for me how parking lot drainage will be addressed at this site. I noticed the site to the north at 22 Victor, the parking lot has some catch basins that seem to route to a stormwater facility, a small pond. So can that be clarified, please, how stormwater will be handled at this site?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it will be connected to the existing infrastructure, the existing stormwater management piping that's along the road that will have a series of catch basins. That drainage will be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of the building permit. So drainage will be absolutely addressed. If I may take a moment, further to the two committee members that were speaking about different configurations. This building could be a lot narrower and a lot longer and impose into the neighborhood. It could be L-shaped into the backyard even more and into the front yard with the driving and the parking between the building to the north and the building to the south. The client is very sympathetic to the existing residents and very sympathetic to the parking in the apartment building in behind. That's why there are no balconies on the south side of the property. That's why the building was put where it was. It was with conscious effort to move it and distance it from that existing residence. And it was configured in such a way that it has that compact footprint so that it's affecting very little of the neighborhood in its orientation.
Follow-up question there, Matthew.
Question that's on a separate topic, if anyone else. But my second question was around consideration for the privacy of Ms. Rushlow at 137 Laird. And in our planning report, there's reference to, and I'm going to read it now. The applicant intends to utilize frosted glass for all habitable room windows that face the southern interior lot line. Later in the paragraph, and you repeated it in your oral remarks, that the use of frosted glass has not been included as a condition due to the inability of the building department to enforce such a condition. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us, please, Ian? And also, if the committee made that a condition of approval, would that have any force and effect?
Well, no. Yeah, talk about the second part of that question, because I think you can answer that one, but I think the other one would probably
So-
come from Jack.
Yep. Through you, Chair. With this, I did explore this being a condition of approval. And with it, I approached the manager of planning. Unfortunately, she's unable to be here tonight. But this is an item from our understanding that the building department and our bylaw department would not be able to enforce at the time, either when issuing a building permit or follow up with bylaw once the property is constructed, as it's not quite a building code requirement. So when building code, from my understanding, is when they issue a permit, it has to be through items pertaining to the building code, whereas frosted glass would not be an item. But for to help better the understanding, the condition of the fence, written in the formality of the condition, is that the fence has to be constructed prior to the issuance of the building permit. So the applicant cannot go and acquire their building permit until that fence is constructed, whereas the frosted glass, you can't have the frosted glass before the walls are up, kind of, if that makes sense there.
Do you want to add to that, Jackie?
No, just basically, I wanted to speak to the frosted glass. As Ian had indicated, the building code can't impose that as a condition. We can't satisfy the building code as a condition of the committee because it's a separate body. And because of it, they can't be satisfied under the building code. It's basically the issue. Providing for frosted glass, those are the kitchens of the units. So there can be some accommodation with frosted glass in that way. I know, for example, Kingsville with the medical clinic, when they were closer to the property line, they used the frosted glass on the bottom portion, so people can't see out of it, but the top was open so that you could still get your light. It was quite an interesting solution. And I think the clients are amenable to that.
Question?
Through you, Chair, just to follow up on that, Jackie. So who benefits from the frosted glass situation? Who benefits? Can those windows still be open?
I don't know. I don't know what the building code requires.
So
what
really we're,
windows.
yeah, we're discussing something that may be relevant, not exactly from the frosted windows, right?
Yeah, but for the most part, if if they have air conditioning and they have frosted windows, then, those windows probably won't be open much.
And in your opinion, who would be affected most by those windows in that? Is that facing the back part of the south side, correct? The back,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
backyard.
Backyard.
There's,
so there's
quite distance separated from the building
so there's really no effect from a privacy issue then, correct?
whatsoever.
It is the fence that's going to permit privacy, most likely, right? Thank you.
Because the developer, when he was looking at this, kept it very low at
Thank you.
at 3 stories. It's not as tall as it could potentially be.
And one last question, if I may, through the chair to Ian. Has there ever been a rezoning on this particular property and property that is currently with the apartment buildings?
Sure. Unfortunately, I do not know the history of the zoning for the property. I'd have to look into that one further. All I know is that it is, I believe it was rezoned more recently for higher density, with that potentially with that apartment complex in mind. Maybe not the exact apartment complex, but it was for higher density. Thank you.
I just have one question for you, Jackie. The fence that's gonna go up, is that gonna, or maybe Ian, is that fence gonna go right up to Laird so it covers the parking lot for Mrs. Rochlo and her noise and whatnot?
Through you, Chair, yes, it will cover the entire parking lot, as per, the zoning bylaw. Whenever you have a parking area that abuts a residential, dwelling with habitable room windows, you have to provide a privacy fence, as a sort of buffering, because you don't want lights shining into your home at all hours. And so that is a requirement under the zoning bylaw, so they will have to construct it at least over that portion. However, there's nothing in the zoning bylaw requiring that fence being constructed in front of the apartment complex itself, only the parking area.
If the board-on-board fence is mandated and on the actual site plan that gets registered on title, it'll be the owner's obligation for all of time to maintain that fence and to construct the fence. Is that correct?
That is correct. And yes, Ian, for your information, there is one on the north side and one on the south side. And I believe it goes around to the side at the back where there's gaps in the present fencing. The biggest thing the neighbor will notice is a reduction of noise from both the parking and the proposed use, but also from the neighborhood. It will become a buffer as well because there'll be two fences now between her and the adjacent apartment building.
All right, any other, oh, Dan has a question.
I had it on. Sorry. You got 15 parking spots, 9 units, 2-bedroom units. Ideally, I mean, older couples probably down to 1 car, but likely a couple would have 2 cars. So I can see that the valid point of parking restraints. And my other comment would be is this building that's existing, the other apartment building with the other spots that I count about 56 spots that are there, and not knowing how many units are in that building, but I can see that there's going to be, people visiting, trying to find a spot, parking on the road, creating hazards. Is these parking spots going to be enough, and how are you going to regulate it? Like, I know in this city, you have to have a parking tag just to park on the street so that residents there are preserve a spot to park. I just see that could be a potential problem with that other building there and this other proposed building, that parking will be an issue.
That's not part of the application, so unfortunately.
Okay, I get it.
It is
With the minor
an understandable concern, but we can't make any changes to that.
Fair enough.
If I can just briefly say, though, we do meet and exceed the bylaw, and the intent is to make sure that we provide as much parking as we possibly could. That's why we kept it low level, low number, 9 units. We didn't want to come before you tonight and ask for relief in parking. So we kept it low, we kept the units low, and we provided enough to meet the bylaw and then some.
Are you saying anything or no? Okay. Not seeing any more anybody else wanting to speak? Oh, did you want to speak? Oh, we can't control the market. We can't control the market. We wouldn't have any answer on that. Right? That's sorry. Like, there's nothing I could say about that.
Well, good, but you won't. I have never.
Okay, sir, I'm going to talk about the application, and I understand her concern, and I'd have the same concern, but we are in a different area, different time anyways. Or do we have a motion for this application or? Matthew, go ahead.
Approve with the conditions, the fencing conditions noted in the staff report.
Andrew? Doreen? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Not seeing, motion passed. So. All right, and if you want to leave now, you can. If you have nothing, well, nothing more to, well, if you don't want to hear the other application, you can go ahead. All right, Ian. Application B 18-24.
All righty. Thank you, Chair. Our last application tonight is B 1824 for the property 687 Beach Street in the former township of Colchester South. The subject property is designated residential in the Town of Essex official plan and is zoned residential 1.1 in the Town of Essex zoning bylaw. The subject property is located within the Essex Region Conservation Authority's limit of regulated area, and the property is currently located on a privately owned street, abuts Lake Erie to the rear, and remains vacant, aside from a small dock leading into the lake. The applicant is requesting to sever a 94 square meter parcel from the existing 1,131 square meter residential lot for the purpose of a lot addition. The severed lands will be consolidated with the adjacent property, 685 Beach Street. The retained parcel will have a lot area of 1,036 square meters. And the reasoning for the lot addition is to transfer the ownership of the existing dock from 687 Beach Street to 685 Beach Street. The receiving lands, 685 Beach Street, abuts the subject property to the east, currently contains a single unit dwelling under construction, and this property maintains the same designation and zoning. Next slide, please. So the applicant has provided a draft survey, and essentially the applicant is looking, like I said, to transfer just a strip of land from one parcel to the next, so that the dock is on the parcel with the house that's currently under construction. Next slide, please. Here you can see the subject property. On the right-hand side, you can see the vacant property, and on the left-hand side, you can see that single unit dwelling under construction. Next slide, please. Here you can see that dock that I was speaking of. Fortunately, I couldn't get a better picture. Next slide, please. And here you can see where the two lot lines are. There's only about a 5-foot difference between their location, but it just goes straight down that laneway or the property there. Next slide, please. So here now for the policies that were considered for this consent application, the PPS and the County of Essex official plan both permit lot adjustments for minor and technical reasons. However, lot additions are not spoken to within either document, and the county official plan delegates approval authority to the lower tier municipalities and the reasonings for them. We see this as minor as it's minimal in size and corrects a boundary issue. The town OP is satisfied as there would be no impacts to the development pattern, traffic, servicing, and there's no change in land use. Both lots abide by the minimum R1.1 lot area and width regulations, and no minor variance is needed on either end. Next slide, please. The application was circulated to all internal and external agencies and all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. No comments were received to this date. Perfect, thank you. The planning department is recommending approval subject to the following conditions. It's our standard conditions for lot addition, such as new survey, draft transfers, confirmation of taxes, drain apportionment, and confirmation that they will merge. Applicant has 2 years as well. Next slide, please. And of course, just to remind the committee, they can approve the application with or without conditions. They can defer the application or they can deny the application, but must state their reasoning. Thank you.
Mr. or Mrs. Francisco, do you have anything to add?
Good evening. I don't have anything else. I think Mr. Ian already explained everything. The reason I request 1.5 meters to the lot to the east because of the dock, because I think it'd be better for me and for the other lot.
Questions from the committee? Oh, go ahead there, Matthew.
Marcia, I don't know if we can go up in the deck there, but Mike, so the properties that, the application makes sense, given the interest of the applicant to have the dock on their property. I get that. Both properties front onto beach, south of beach is Lake Erie. Is the dock actually on either of those properties or is it on Crown land? Like, where's the footprint of the dock? Is it owned by 687? Is it on 687 presently or not?
Through you, Chair, I can't speak to who exactly owns the dock or how that connects, I'm going to say with the earth. That's something more regulated from my understanding through IRCA. However, if you were to access the dock, it would be through 687, the lot on the western side. So in order to access it, the applicant's asking for it to be for the land from 685. I hope that clarifies.
If you zoom in on the air photo here, which you may not be able to do, it doesn't look like the dock's on either of the properties. So if it's on Crown land, you know, if you want to build something on that site, you got to get a permit from IRCA for sure. But you can access that dock from either property. So like I say, I'm sympathetic to the application, but if the dock isn't on either of the properties, I'm not sure why we have an application, because it can be accessed from either property presently, if in fact it's not on the legal footprint of either of those properties, if you follow my logic here.
To comment to that, being a lakefront owner myself, there's always been this unwritten perception and or fact that the property ownership level goes up into the water level. So the water level up and down. So we're suggesting that our property or the property lines do not exceed past the shoreline. I'm not sure what the question is because we have docks out and they're not Crown land. They're on the water, and it shows on our permits that is the property line that exceeds out into the water line. So I'm not sure what defines Crown land.
Chair, irregardless of the reason why they want it, under the current policies, is the lot addition permitted? And even if they just wanted a wider yard, would it be permitted?
Through you, Chair, yes, that it would be permitted regardless if the dock was there or not.
Any other questions?
We're not sure based on the resources we have whether the dock's on the subject property or not. We can't determine that this second, but regardless, if an application was brought forward for a 1.5 wide lot addition, just because the guy had a bigger mower deck than, you know, he wanted to use it well, or, you know, whatever, then that would be permitted. Is that correct? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, yes, that is correct.
Do I have a motion? Doreen, go ahead.
Motion to approve with conditions as noted.
By Dan, all in favor? Motion passed. You got your, just have a great day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. And now it's just motion to adjourn. Doreen and Dan. Want to get it? All of it. Good.